This is Andi Purewal for Boxing News. I'm joined by legendary cutman Stitch Duran here in Las Vegas. Stitch, always a pleasure. It's been a minute since we last were able to do this. So how are you?
I'm doing good. I think last time was when Canelo fought, huh?
Probably,
I
yeah.
think so. I saw you then. I'm doing good, thank God.
I'm glad to hear it. Stitch, always busy. You're always on the move yourself, as am I. How are you finding life on the road as a cutman?
You know, I just did a show with interview with Chris Mannix, and I tell people, and I'm sure you could attest to that. If traveling and restaurant food is the worst that could happen to us, I think we're doing pretty good, man. Yeah.
It's a side which is certainly a good side to boxing, to say the least. Here we are in Las Vegas. There was a big weekend of boxing amongst us. Obviously, Friday night, see Sanisa Estrada defending her world titles here in the Palms Hotel. And then, obviously, we've got other fights on Saturday night, which I'm sure I'll ask your opinion on later on. But yeah, working here with Top Rank, walk me through the fighters you're working with.
Well, I'm working 3 fights here. You know, part of Top Rank. Top Rank brings us in as house cut me and Mike Basil. I'm working with Cortez and I think Jalen Phillips, and then this other kid. Still got to pick up his name. So 3 fights. You know, kind of an easy night.
I was not obviously Stitched, a lot of people will see you now working the top rank shows. What's that like? Does it damage any reputation, not reputation, but relationships rather with other promoters, other fighters who aren't necessarily with top rank, or do they know they can come to you if they feel like they want to use you and your services?
Ooh, that's a good question, Andy. You're good, bro. Now, you know what? Top Rank gave us this opportunity, and we're independent contractors, right? So now there's many times where if there's economically a bigger fight, then they understand. But we have alternates that come in and fill in for us. So no, not a problem at all. I was in Tokyo Saturday with Robesi. Even though he fights for Top Rank, I came under the tutelage of his management. So.
How difficult is it to then trust whoever you maybe recommend to top rank or you bring in to do as good a job as what you would expect from yourself or from Mike?
Oh no, these guys, you know what? The guys I bring in that I use have MMA experience, so they know how to wrap hands well, and I know because I see them. They know how to wrap hands, and they know how to work cuts. And you know, when we go and introduce ourselves to all these young fighters, guys look at me and they look at the other ones and think, well, how come I don't have Stitch? But I tell them, no, quality-wise, we're all the same. You know, so it's just don't let the names fool you. These guys that Top Rank has working with them, we're all the best of the best.
That must be nice for Stitch because you are widely considered to be one of, if not the best cutman within the sport. You obviously have a very decorated career spanning many years. With that in mind, do you find it difficult if maybe fighters continue to ask for you, but you know maybe you're working with another fighter so you can't work with them and you have to somewhat let them down?
No, they understand. You know, they understand that it's a first come, first serve. But you know, like I say, I'm not going to leave them without anybody that's all recommend people. And fighters ask me, well, what do you think about this guy or that guy? And I'll be honest with them, you know, on my opinions.
I'm interested again, Stitch, to get your thoughts, and I don't expect you just to sell it because you're a cutman, but you know, during many fights, many times over the years, maybe you will see a fighter who doesn't pay for a top level cutman and he might come back to bite them during the fight. What's your thoughts if ever it's happened in your career or when you've seen it on TV where maybe a fighter gets a bad cut and maybe they haven't got somebody as experienced as they should do to deal with that and it can prove to be costly?
I say it all the time, Andy. I say it all the time, and you know, I always study corners, and you know, keep in mind, and we as cutmen and we as trainers in combat sports, none of us have to be certified to do what we do. You learn in the trenches, but yeah, I see a lot of guys doing a lot of mistakes, and it's not fair to these young fighters. That's why the program that Top Rank has makes a lot of sense because you know if they don't have a cutman, now you do. You know, I'm working with a kid that I think he's 4-4. You know, and for me to, he just got a big smile on his face, thinking Stitches with me.
I mean, Stitch, we're speaking of big cuts, obviously last weekend in Oklahoma, he was working with George Kambosos, and in that fight, there was two big cuts. Obviously, George had one early on, and then Maxi got one later on. What was that like trying to deal with kind of George's cut, and what goes through your mind when you see the opponent has a bad cut? Do you kind of give you any of your own opinion as to how maybe George could benefit from that, and maybe look to capitalise on where the cut is and make it look worse? Maybe, you know, if you're a judge watching it, they can see the cut pouring and think that could be an influence in their own mind.
Yeah, you know, I try to give our fighter as much advantage as I can through my experience, right? As a matter of fact, Robesi, when he fought Saturday in Japan, his opponent, his eye was swelling. So I told him, right, his right eye is swelling. And then finally up around the temple, was swelling. So, the Salas, the coach, did a great job in giving instructions, and Robesi following him. But he don't. My concentration is the face. His is the fighter. So no, I do. I try to help him as much and give him that advantage. That's my job.
Just on that Kambosos-Hughes fight, obviously afterwards there was a lot of talk as to whether or not it was the right decision. I know you're not a judge; it's not your responsibility. But what did you make of kind of the fallout from Kambosos-Hughes?
Well, I mean, when I left, as soon as the fight's over, I'm gone, right? But I thought he won, and people, they're bitching and moaning, but I stay away from that. That's not my job. And like I say, once the fight's over, he's not bleeding no more, I'm out.
That's fair enough, Stitch. Another fight I want to get your thoughts on is one which is on the horizon. Certainly the boxing fraternity hasn't necessarily taken to it as well, but Tyson Fury, somebody you know well, is going to face somebody from the UFC, Francis Ngannou, as a man who's worked in both sports. What's your thoughts on this crossover bout up at heavyweight?
Hey, well, listen, I'm working with Nate Diaz when he fights Jake Paul, so if you're asking me for some negative information, you're crazy. I did KSI when he fought Logan Paul. I've worked with Anson Gibb when he fought Jake Paul. Of course, I'm working this one. I applaud this whole program, and let me give the zone credit on the first one with them because I didn't know who these guys were. Right, but when it comes to business and sales and marketing, it made so much sense because these guys have like 20 million followers. I didn't even know that existed, right? I didn't even know who KSI was. I didn't know who these guys were, but it makes sense because if 1% of these people buy to see these guys fight, then it was a good program. And I know they're different because when KSI fought Logan Paul, I walk into the Staples Center and nobody knows who I am. Everybody knows who Leon is, and the guy from England. So I knew it was a different world.
Do you ever get caught up in it and maybe, or at least understand the frustrations when you look at certainly the Fury and Ngannou fight, where boxing fans weren't happy because they wanted to see Fury Usyk, they wanted to see that undisputed battle, especially when you consider throughout pretty much every other division we've been treated to so many fantastic fights this year.
Well, you got to look at having Tyson Fury's at the point where he's having fun, right, and he's making money. This fight's he's gonna make a lot of money. So, at what point do you say, well, let me continue staying on this boxing route, or let me fight Francis Ngannou, right? And the same thing with Ngannou, because he left the UFC under protest because Dana didn't want him to do that. But, the money that he's making is gonna way, way be more than he would have did in the UFC. So I'm glad that, he took the stance and said, you know what, I'm my own man, I'm gonna fight Tyson Fury. I applaud it, that's fine, I don't mind.
I know obviously when you left the UFC, it wasn't necessarily like on the best of terms. You had your fallout there. With that in mind, what's kind of your relationship with like their fighters? You mentioned working with Nate Diaz, amongst others that you've worked with over the years. What's your relationship like with people who are either contracted to the UFC or have been maybe recently been released?
Now, you know what? They show me the same love they show me then. And it's kind of crazy. Robbie Lawler, he just got inducted into the fight with him and Rory McDonald just got inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. And at the speech, he says, I want to give thanks to Stitch Duran for keeping me in the game and this and that. So he applauded me 8 years after. People started clapping, and friends that were there sent me the videos. So it's nice to continue. Nate Diaz, when I was in Stockton last week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and we're like family, So they know that what I did that for them, and speaking up for them. I became the voice for them. And like Luis Doria, when I saw him here at the Bubble at the MGM, I haven't seen him in 8 years. He's Anderson Silva's trainer and a lot of top Brazilian fighters. He comes up to me, Andy, and says, Stitch, he goes, we, the coaches, the fighters, we thank you for speaking up because we couldn't. Well, that said it all.
With Nate Diaz and Jake Paul going into that fight, a lot of people have been critical of kind of the videos we've seen of Nate Diaz. Obviously, your time with him, you said you saw him last week in Stockton. How is he looking, and is it a matter of he's just looking for the paycheck, or does he genuinely believe that he's going into that fight and he will defeat Jake Paul?
Oh yeah, no, he's definitely prepped mentally and physically. I was there for those 3 days and I saw him work. As he's getting ready for a world title fight. People talk, wow, his style. You know what? Tyson Fury, when I saw him fight Vladimir, we all thought that Vladimir was going to destroy him, right? Physically and style-wise. Well, he beats Vladimir, and I could never understand until I saw him fight Deontay Wilder. But Tyson Fury's style is one that you can't teach somebody how to fight because he don't know It's just so impulsive. Well, Nate Diaz is the same way. His style of fighting is very unorthodox, and Jake Paul is very. He's going to be a straight boxer. But people don't realize that he was a sparring partner for Andre Ward, so he's been in the trenches, you know. So and Andre Ward's one of the advisors. So don't and then, and then the thing about it, Nate knows how to take these shots. Is he going to get cut? Probability is like probably 100%. But that's why it's good for me to be there with him. And like I say, I worked all his fights and his brother Nate's fights or Nick's fights, and when I was with the UFC, every one of them. And we're from the same area, so it makes sense.
What do you prefer, Stitch? Do you prefer a busy fight where somebody is cut and you have to work away for a night, or would you prefer to just kind of sit on the back on your stool, nice easy, just kind of watching the fight go by?
Give me some action, bro. Give me some action. That's what I enjoy doing, and that's what I'm good at, right? So, and that's why they bring me in. We as cutmen, we're insurance policies, and I've made a lot of money for a lot of fighters. So, yeah, give me some action.
What advice would you give to anybody when you mentioned Nate Diaz? Obviously, he'll have a lot of scar tissue around his face for blows that he'd have taken over years in the UFC. If you're a fighter going into a fight and you know that, and you know the probabilities, in fact, if certain areas of your face get caught, you probably will get cut. What advice would you give to a fighter to try and lessen the chances of that happening?
Well, if you're going to get cut, you're going to get cut, right? But you try to minimize it, but have a good cutman, and what I do is I tell these young fighters, look, I'm going to keep ice on you every round. I'm not going to wait till you start swelling or anything like that. I'm going to do a lot of preventing maintenance. And so you try to, because they're taking shots and the blood just kind of gets hot and the face gets hot, and you try to cool that down and keep the blood vessels constricted as much as possible and try to do your job preventive, But if they get cut, they have to understand that you're going to take care of them.
Just something else I want to get your thoughts on, Stitch. Obviously, a lot of people trying to draw comparisons between the boxing world and the UFC world in terms of how much easier it is to make those big fights in the UFC in comparison to boxing. Now, of course, UFC is just one promotional banner. Boxing, you're dealing with 5-6 major promoters across the world. What are your thoughts on anybody within the UFC who kind of says that they get one up on boxing because they get the bigger fights sooner, or in the boxing world, when they do come, we're treated to some massive ones, i.e. Saturday night, Spence Crawford?
Yeah, well, UFC's done a great job in promoting and marketing. The UFC, not so much the participants, because I don't know a lot of these guys that are fighting. I know that they're fighting in the UFC. In the cage is the UFC, so a lot of that. But yeah, they do that on a consistent basis. To have fights like Spence, to have fights like Ngannou and Fuller, it's nice to see that. And so we'll see what the future brings when it comes to matching people up.
Just to get your thoughts on that main event on Saturday night, Spence Crawford, what do you think goes down?
Well, I don't predict them, Andy, because, I think I told you before, none of us know, and my prediction level's like about a minus 75, right? So I don't predict them, but I look at it as the probability of cuts, and I think the probability of cuts is minimal, which leads me to believe that the chances of going the distance are pretty high. That's the way I look at them.
That's fair enough, Stitch. And then just a final one, obviously, we since last time we spoke, obviously a new Creed film came out. What's the reception been like on your behalf?
Oh man, it's been so crazy. I tell you, it's funny. People stop me, and they still do. But hey, man, you were the UFC, and hey, boxing, but now they're stopping me because of the Creed 3 movie, and it's never happened before. But they're showing it in all these planes. As you go home, I'm sure.
I actually watched it on the way over as well.
That's what I'm saying. So people are stopping me and say, "Hey, man, is that you on the?" So yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. I'm at the fights. I'm watching in a way and Fuller fight, and this guy comes up to me and says, "Hey, how you doing?" He goes, "I was a two-time champ, a Japanese guy, mine's so-and-so, a two-time bantamweight champion and all that. I'm 46 years old, and can we take a picture?" I said, "Yeah." And then he says, we were talking about Creed 3, right? He goes, "I've seen Creed 3 5 times." Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
So we're going to see you return for another movie installment soon?
That's going to happen. They're working on 4, and Michael B. Jordan told me in 2 that I'm with him as long as I want. So expect to see me there.
Well, Stitch, I look forward to that one. And it's always good to catch up with you. I know you've got to shoot off home now because you've got a few things to do as this day progresses. So, yeah, it's good to see you. Obviously, enjoy tomorrow night. Enjoy the weekend ahead. And I'll speak to you again soon.
It's always anytime, man. Doors are always open.